of, I guess, competing priorities and the challenges that you face here in India and in Canada. But we wanted to move things forward. I think Canada can provide a lot of value in terms of our own experience, but India also has tremendous experience in conflict resolution that we can work cooperatively on. Plus, but more importantly, our defense industry provides some significant capability to other nations, but it doesn't have the same level of significance here in Canada. There are some great companies that are doing some good work here, and I want to be able to move on that so we can highlight some of the great work that our Canadian defense industry has done. So we're moving towards a direct relationship of reciprocal training, and also some defense innovation as well, but also looking at moving forward on our defense industry relationship as well. Thank you.
I think Geeta Mohan was...
Hi, Geeta Mohan from NewsX. My question to you is your experience fighting the Taliban. We have a bigger problem today, that's the ISIS. In terms of fighting the ISIS and the terrain that we're looking at, West Asia and Afghanistan, what is it and how can the world, the global community come together in fighting the menace of ISIS? Second part of my question would be on the fact that there are concerns that India has when it comes to extremism and terrorism. There are stands that have been taken with regards to one of the biggest concerns that India has that has to do with Khalistan and the Khalistani movement. Your stand, and what do you think of India's concerns regarding Khalistani terrorists?
First of all, the direct threat of ISIS. I've been involved in uniform since I turned 18, in wearing either a police uniform or a Canadian military uniform and dealing with the direct threats. So the experience that I have gained in dealing with the extremism in Afghanistan, and also some of the direct threats that we receive in Canada. We also have to look at the root causes of each problem. Usually the Taliban, ISIS are the symptoms of other situations that allow these groups to grow. In Afghanistan, I can go into many details of how the Taliban actually grew and what caused it and what type of corruption allowed them to garner the support. These groups are small entities, but they garnered that support for some reason. And I had a direct conversation with the former Minister of Defense from Iraq, because ISIS wasn't this one great big organization that crossed the border and started taking land. It was because some of the grievances within the Sunni population that allowed this group to take advantage of those grievances and grow. And that which led to a place where I call it it's a scale of grievances. When it gets to a certain point, you have to use military force, and that's what we have. So one is you have to fight them directly, but if you do not deal with the recruitment aspect of any organization, you will have to continually fight them. So you have to be able to address the recruitment, and that's one thing that I worked very closely with the U.S. on, the previous Secretary of Defense and the new one, General Mattis, who I've known of his efforts, and he knows of the work that I have done, is how do we look at the root cause within in dealing with ISIS. And it's a political issue as well, which something that we've actually been working on and had a significant impact. But the bigger concern is not just dealing with it in Iraq. How do we now start eliminating them and not allowing them to build a network internationally? So that's what we're focusing on. And in terms of your second question, and I know that there's a lot of media questions that popped in, and I just want to be able to ask you a question. Hopefully you're not a journalist either. But on a serious note, if you look at, I've been given many labels throughout my life, and your actions of who you are, it's judged on by what you do. If you look at my actions, I don't try to be sucked into the internal politics of any one province or any one nation. I can assure you that I've said this publicly in Canada and many other places. I do not promote the breakup of any country. And my goal is to build a relationship as a representative of the Canadian government, and that's what I'm here to do. And I'm also very proud of the fact that I was born here and I get to visit my home as well.
Harish, we have a young researcher from Observe Research Foundation.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Harish from the ORF. My question would be, how should the United Nations look at failed nations? Now, failed nations, I mean, it is essential to make attempts to stabilize failed nations because of two reasons primarily. One, because terrorism could be exported to other countries, and the second reason being genocide could happen within the nation. So is there scope for more UN peacekeeping forces to go to the country to stabilize the nation? Talking about South Sudan specifically. Analysts have suggested that the United Nations should intervene and take over the administration, and it should be under international administration for the next 10 to 15 years. Is that possible at all, given the power politics that happen within the United Nations Security Council? Thank you.
No, that's a great question. That question has to be addressed directly. And it's something that I made a key point of looking at myself. We can't, as I stated many times, this is not the peacekeeping of the past. Any conflict that you look at, you can't bring a strategy to a country or a failed state. You have to get a good understanding of what's going on. And I'll be honest with you, and I've said this publicly, we failed to do this when we first went to Afghanistan, had to learn these lessons the hard way. And I made it very clear that when I look at sending our troops into harm's way, we will do a thorough analysis and we will take our time. Because it's better to get it right. Because if you understand it, then develop the strategy because of your understanding on the ground, then you have to have an impact. We have to ask ourselves, with certain missions, like for example, the Democratic Republic of Congo, 17 years, coming on 18 now, are things progressing? Are we really, when we talk about the protection of civilians, are we doing a good enough job? So each conflict is different. I've been twice into Africa on a fact-finding mission with key experts, and understanding each conflict, not just by country, but also by regions as well. I'm very happy to hear that the conversation of understanding the conflict is moving on. Where we have to take a look at and ask ourselves the hard questions about the root cause. A lot of the times the government itself is part of the problem. We also have to address looking at sometimes we can be part of the problem by insisting that we have to have elections every 4 years. And this is coming from Louise Arbour, who's one of our premier eminent Canadians, who's one of the experts on human rights. In an area where they're not fully developed, sometimes elections also breed violence as well. So we have to have a deep understanding of what is happening on the ground. We have to be mindful that if you're going to have a peace treaty, you're not going to be able to stand in between them. Radical groups are recruiting at the same time. Business communities not being able to create the jobs for the people. We have to look at the high percentage of the youth that not being able to work. So we're talking about the recruitment. So putting all this together, I'm happy to say that I have a great conversation with the former Secretary General and the new one and their new leadership that's coming in, and with the allies, especially with the U.S., and how do we look at bringing peace support operations into the new era? And then how do we link this with some of the other operations that we are also conducting? For example, what we're doing in our operations in Iraq are also linked to some of the efforts in Africa. Because as you know, the displacement of fighters and leadership is going into other parts of the world. There's a migrant crisis that's happening from Northern Africa into Europe. So we have to address that question. We don't have the answers yet, but I'll give you a few innovative approaches that we as Canadians are willing to offer up once we decide where we want to go. We know that troop contributing nations at times can be part of the problem. So we're looking at, from our experience, how do we do capacity building? So we're looking at an opportunity where a troop contributing nations, that we will actually do pre-deployment training with the troop contributing nations anywhere up to 3 to 6 months, depending on who we're with. Then actually deploy with them, and similar to what we used to do in Afghanistan, and do mentorship there. So not only you're going to be able to make the mission far more effective, you're actually training potentially an African nation force that's going to be going back to their host nations. So plus you're having an impact on the mission, but now you have a metric that you can measure that'll look at training more people as well. So these are some of the things that we have to address directly, but each area is going to be very unique, and we have to address those issues, and we have to address the radical wings that are recruiting some of the population directly. And one I also just mention is, if there's any business folks out there, industry and business in these nations play a critical role, and I've been working with some key industry leaders on how do we look at using business community in developing the strategies that's going to create jobs. At the end of the day, my experience in Afghanistan and anywhere else, a Taliban fighter will choose working in the field or getting money for construction over joining the Taliban, and the same is true in groups like ISIS as well.
Thank you. We have time for a few more questions, so if you can be very, very brief in your questions, comments.
So I'm K. Mahesh, I'm a civil servant, and so you have an extraordinary, really great achievements in your life. I was very proud of you, and your lecture was extremely stimulating. My question is, sir, that in conflicts, should we term killings of people on the basis of ethnicity as genocide? How would you vote, say, as what happened in the Ontario Legislative Assembly, that out of 107 members, 1/3 were present, and they termed the 1984 riots as genocide? So how would you vote in such a resolution belonging to the Liberal Party? Thank you.
I'm not really sure how this relates to conflict. What I'd like to say is that the provincial legislature is a democratic elected provincial body, a private member's bill that was put forward. But we, at the federal level, we represent Canada. In terms of genocide, the word cannot be used lightly. There is a process in place that you can go through with the UN that actually gets that recognition when it comes to Rwanda and other places, and that's where I'd like to leave that question. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Janet Chopra. We have one thing in common, Honorable Minister. You're a combat veteran, so am I, except you're much younger, and I'm a platinum veteran of 4 wars. Okay, I want to focus on your heading, Peacekeeping in a Changing World. Peacekeeping was upgraded to peacemaking, worsened rather, and it's worsened further, and it's called peace enforcement. What I want to ask you is that Canada initiated the Peace Building Commission maybe 15 years ago, and I was part of it. We did good work in Rwanda, Sierra Leone. What I want to know is, what about Afghanistan and other disturbed areas? Once they settle down, when you talk to an NGO taking over, why can't the Peace Building Commission, a UN body, be responsible for it? And since you're the defense minister, very quickly, I can't resist asking you. The defense cooperation that the director mentioned is rather nascent between India and Canada. You have technological skills, climate experience that the director talked about. We are operating in Siachen, Ladakh, northern Himalayas. We can very meaningfully exchange our views on this. And finally, I would request you to explore possibilities during a tenure over here, during a stay over here. Why can't we do some manufacturing between private companies of Canada and those in India and make it into an hub? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. First of all, I want to commend your service, sir, and your experience, and you can tell that you speak from tremendous experience. Yeah, there are many opportunities that we can look at for Afghanistan, and to take many approaches. I don't think Afghanistan is there just yet to take it to that level. There's still a little bit more work that needs to be done. We, as Canada, even though we may not have troops on the ground, we actually provide significant amount of money and resources for the security services, so they can now stand on their 2 feet. Yes, and there are many roles that the UN can play down the road, but they're not there yet. And your second question regarding greater cooperation between defense. Well, sir, this is one of the reasons that I'm here. We're looking, and we are exploring, had a wonderful conversation today with the the finance minister / defense minister, who I am very envious with. I'd love to be able to be the finance minister and defense minister. So we are looking and exploring some of the opportunities. I have made it a point from last year when I met the former defense minister to move on some of the Cold Warfare training, and we invited members of the Indian military to participate. And it's one of the reasons why there's no secret. I've said this is the second time we're going to have a frigate here to India as well, and the second one will be coming in May. So we do have some great opportunities, but first we need to be able to build this relationship and move forward, and I'm looking forward to this opportunity.
Karunanidhi, I'm a physician from south of India. So it's heartening to see the Ambassador, Harjit and Sajjan, both of you, not merely as Indians, but as a truly global citizen of repute. So thanks to Sanjay and Subsoni for bringing these Asians or Indians together to our podium. We hope that India will promote more such, the brain gain for the world is more from Indian brain drain. Okay. Sajjan, yeah. The peacekeeping for Canadians is you are all proud. It's a tradition, and the Canadians' ability to train Asians, India, Pakistan, Bangladeshis as a peacekeepers is extraordinary. So, as this gentleman rightly said, it is not merely peacekeeping; it is peacemaking. As an individual and as a global politician of you, Justin Trudeau and all, why can't you help us to make peace with our own Pakistanis, Bangladeshis by training our soldiers? I truly hope that you will take up this challenge and bring your Prime Minister here and peace for Asians. All the best. Thank you.
Well, to address the question of peacekeeping, peacemaking, peace enforcement, and as I stated, if you kind of read into the words of what I say, you need to understand conflict first. And so whatever you call it, it is about understanding the conflict and what resources you bring to the table. And what was happening in Afghanistan, we had full-on combat, but at the same time, we're trying to bring stability and peace into an area as well. I've served in Bosnia, where there was peace enforcement directly. And this is why, you can call it the term I call it peace support operations. But at the end of the day, if you do not get a deep understanding of the conflict itself, you're not going to build the right strategy. So we will look at and making sure when we deploy, we will have the right number of troops. We will make sure we go in with robust equipment. But most importantly, we're going to go in with a robust mandate to making sure that our troops have the ability to use force, if necessary, to protect themselves and protect civilians. And regarding the security challenges within this area, I hope that you can actually come to peace sooner, because I'll be honest with you that you can make a far greater contribution to prevent conflict in other parts of the world, and the Indian troops are doing absolute wonderful work in places like when I mentioned that I met them in Goma. I was on my way to actually board our aircraft on the airplane, and for security reasons you have to get on, but I just stopped our convoy because it was just very proud for me to be able to thank them and a person who was also born in India, just to be able to shake their hand. And I went up to them not as a defense minister, and they didn't know who I was. And I had a direct conversation. Unfortunately, they found out somebody mentioned the defense minister, all of a sudden they got in line, and then no one would speak to me after that. But India has a tremendous opportunity of diversity and opportunity to support, and I just wish things would, stability, greater stability can come in this region, so you can put real resources to bringing stability in other parts of the world.
I would like to end with the last word to the lady there in the center, if she can ask a question.
Thank you so much, sir. I'm Stuti Banerjee from the Indian Council of World Affairs. My question to you is, you talk about conflict prevention and peacekeeping, and like you rightly said, the world is changing, and Canada and the UN is looking at how to change peacekeeping in this changing world. But one of the major problems is the budget for this, and the reforms that the UN has to go through to enforce or to ensure that the peacekeeping operations, which generally drag on for a number of years, are able to actually sustain themselves, and you are able to get out of conflict zones, establish peace, and then move.
That's a great point and a great question. That's exactly what we in Canada would like to do. For us, getting involved in peace support operations is not a check in the box. I will not recommend sending any Canadian troops into harm's way if they're not going to have a meaningful contribution. I will not do that. And the Prime Minister knows this, and he would not accept any recommendation from me. He takes sending our troops into harm's way extremely seriously. So we need to make sure that when we send our troops, regardless of country, they're going to have a meaningful effort. But the military alone cannot solve a conflict. So we have to be very honest to look at what has driven that conflict. And so I've looked at various issues, whether it's South Sudan and the African Union. They're doing, by the way, some great work as well, and what the United Nations can do. We have to look at what the root cause of the problem is. And most of the time, it's the governments themselves, not providing and creating this division between the rich and the poor, and we heard this story many times in many other places. So we have to be able to have a direct conversation within the UN and make the reform. Troop contributing nations need to be able to provide good troops and not be part of the problem. The sexual violence that has been created by troops, that's beyond unacceptable. This cannot happen. When you have civilians looking out for support, they can't be fearful of the blue beret. Second, we need to make sure that troops, when they provide the resources, that they come with the right equipment as well. Because you don't want to be a drain on the resources. Need the right rules of engagement, so you need the making sure that you have protection of civilians, the right mandate to be able to carry out the mission. The last thing you want to do is send troops into areas with not a clear mandate, and it creates greater frustration. And to be honest, having served and have many soldiers have served, you actually end up creating PTSD when a soldier cannot act, and the protection of civilians creates PTSD. So we've got to make sure they have the rough mandate. Then the final piece to it is we need to have an honest conversation with the political system. We can't just try to do peace support operations within the government structure. We need to have direct conversations, and I won't name a country. When you go to visit a nation and you see the poor and the conflict, and then you go visit the leader in a 5-star palace, you can see where the problem is. So we need to have those direct conversations and deal with those. And and I'm happy to say at the United Nations, we are having those conversations. But what are we going to do about it? We can't overnight have troop contributing nations come in with modern equipment or be trained up to a certain standard. So we need to do something about it. So this is one of the reasons we in Canada are looking at an innovative approach of doing capacity building. We have some tremendous skill there. So we are looking at potentially, this is not, we haven't decided yet, of actually going through a training center or building a training center and have troop contributing nations come and do pre-deployment training with us. Then we deploy and mentor them there. Plus, in Canada, we will not launch a mission that's military alone. We will always launch a mission that's whole of government comprehensive, where you have diplomacy, capacity building, and development funds attached to our mission as well. So we will provide that. Now imagine if other nations, if this works, and I know it will, because from our good experience in other places, if other nations also started to do this. Like I said, we will immediately have an impact on the mission itself. Nations who are providing the troop contributing nations now will actually have troops that will go back that can train others. Then we have to look at dealing with the direct threat. How do we deal with the radical problem? We cannot ignore that radical threat. So it has to be either removed, eliminated, arrested, or whatever it takes. Because you cannot have a free radical in that regime. You need to be able to work with the political system that's going to be able to making sure that the people are going to be able to benefit as well. And finally, you need the political will to be able to push it through. And United Nations cannot do this alone. We as ministers need to be involved and have direct conversations with those governments. And I'm happy to say that this conversation has started. And I look forward to announcing our peace support operations. And we do need to modernize the system. but it cannot be done without the UN leadership, and I'm happy to say the new Secretary General and their leadership are looking at this directly. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for your excellent exposition on conflict prevention and peacekeeping in a changing world. We at ORF have been looking at this issue in great detail in recent years, and India more broadly has been looking at this issue. It's been indeed an honor for us to have you here and hear your views on this important issue, as well as the challenges it poses for India and Canada as they start moving forward in shaping their future trajectory. And I think what your talk today has done is to generate several points of discussion for us in India, in Canada hopefully, and for the international community at large on some of the proposals that you have proposed. So with this, I thank you once again, sir, and I also thank you, the audience, for being with us today. Thank you so much.